Happy politics, and welcome to the podcast you're most likely to watch from your throne. That's right, this is BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca. My name is Maclean K, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
Jordan Bateman, Vice President of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to say that Maclean K has changed, that the Czech news bump of being on Czech TV every week but we actually had to redo the intro to this podcast because Mr. Perfection there decided he didn't want to be caught on camera fighting off a sneeze. So
right.
Czech has changed you, man.
Times, I don't want anyone thinking I've got the plague, right? I mean, my wife suffers from seasonal allergies, and she's terrified of taking the bus because, every time someone sneezes, everyone does this collective clench. And so it's this ordeal every single day. And so now I just had that now live in front of all of you, our listeners and watchers, thinking, oh, no, Maclean's got it. No, I don't think I do, but I definitely a little bit of the dust.
All right, well, there you go. Anyways, I also enjoy another view of your lovely home, Maclean. I feel like I'm getting quite the tour.
You are indeed. The ever-changing landscape that is my living room. And when you can't travel, you rearrange your condo.
That is those are some fine, I believe, IKEA bookshelves behind you, perhaps?
I don't even know. They're long inherited by, I think, Mr. and Mrs. K, but I'm not even sure. These might have even come with the condo, now that I think about it.
Oh, wow.
So they were inherited.
All right, well, there you go.
Well, speaking of inherited, well, we didn't inherit the throne speech. It's a terrible segue. But obviously the number one topic of discussion today in the BC Poly realm was yesterday's speech from the throne, which ordinarily happens at the beginning of a session, and you kind of have to ignore the weeks that we sat earlier this spring. It is the traditional kickoff to a new session in the legislature. It's delivered by the Lieutenant Governor, in this case, Janet Austin. And, well, Jordan, there's most of the reaction to it is kind of what you'd expect from modern day throne speeches, which was there's not a lot in it, really. Now, I say that's by design. I'm curious on your take.
Well, I think the best moment of the throne speech was Vice Regal Dog Macduff running up the stairs of the red carpet of the legislature. It shows you how casual we've all become here in British Columbia. Just kidding. The Vice Regal Macduff is an outstanding dog and a great follow on Instagram. I always like seeing Janet Austin, my wife's former boss at YWCA Vancouver. So I always I have a bit of a fanboy vibe when it comes to Janet Austin. I think she's just a fantastic leader, and it was nice to see her. Other than that was highlights. Seeing Janet, seeing Vice Regal Macduff. Not much else there in that throne speech. He was a real nothing burger. You really had to parse for anything of any kind of interest in it. It was a rehash of old announcements. I wouldn't even say it was an election platform rehash because there was even that much in there. So disappointing. I am reliably informed by you that you are the reason why these throne speeches all suck now. So, Maclean, I would like you to confess
this. I wouldn't say the reason, but I definitely was around for it. If you read Rob Shaw's piece on the throne speech this morning, he sort of, I don't want to say laments, because Rob knows what he's looking at, but in the Gordon Campbell era, throne speeches were these dense, Castro length, 45 minutes epics in which there'd be piles of new announcements, sometimes really, big and profound policy shifts.
Yep.
That changed under Christy Clark because she made the very reasonable and true point that, well, no one watches the throne speech. The audience is literally the gallery. And there's precious little value in having someone who, by definition, cannot be elected make your big announcements, and in the most boring backdrop possible in the legislature, and even more so if she's going to make a pile of them. Why wouldn't you spread those out? And so there was, I don't want to say a rough patch, that's not entirely true, but there was sort of a period in which people would say, well, that's it? I mean, this throne speech was only 20 minutes. Don't you care? It's just a different philosophy. I would argue that in the cable TV, much less social media age, dominating the news cycle is not something you can do anymore. And so that Christy Clark was quite right about that. And, judging by today's throne speech and some of the few in the last couple of years, I think John Horgan agrees.
So you're saying John Horgan is copying Christy Clark's leadership style. That's big news. No, I agree. Like the Campbell era, I can think of lines from a few of those throne speeches. The 5 great goals, the golden decade, the cupboard is bare speech in 2008. So there's items there, and you're right. That is very much a shift. I would like to see government use this opportunity to kind of cast a bit of vision, though, even if it's not concrete plans. The throne speech does have an important role in the historic, nature of our democracy. It's, one of the very few times where you could, theoretically have people break away and defeat the government and force an election. Never going to happen in a majority, but it is, theoretically one of two things: throne speech and budget, where that could happen. This was pretty dull. Now, I think you were correct in your piece for the Orca, where you talk about how it was clearly edited up to the last minute, which is not uncommon. Throne speeches always are. But, this one very much, you get the feeling that the first draft of this was really going to be like victory lap. Like, we did it, we beat COVID, everyone's on their way to getting vaccinated, and we're headed. And the third wave really, sunk that idea. And it became this sort of mishmash of, we're brilliant, we've been managing this brilliantly, and this darn third wave, we'll get through it, and then we'll be back to managing brilliantly, and off we go. Not a great, inspiring, call to action. But you're right, completely overshadowed. This was at 2 o'clock, I think, totally overshadowed by the 3 o'clock briefing by Dr. Henry and Adrian Dix, where, again, we were submitted or subjected to a 22-minute sermon full of different kind of platitudes and very confusing rules. But nonetheless, throne speech, there were a couple things I want to highlight, if I may.
Yes.
This is how lame the throne speech was. They brag in the section called Protecting Our Environment. The NDP government, with a straight face, bragged about removing over 120 tons of marine debris from BC coast and shorelines. I did the math on like a fishing vessel, about 3,500 pounds. They're basically bragging that they were, removed one derelict boat per 375 kilometers of coastline in British Columbia. I'm not sure that's worthy of the inclusion in the throne speech, but there it was, 120 tons of marine debris. Like, maybe try a little bit harder to find. If I were the Green Party, I'd be like, really? This is your highlighting, like, this is one of the environmental accomplishments you're highlighting, like 120 tons? That doesn't seem like much, but who am I to write anything for Sonia Furstenau? The other thing is, I want to talk a little bit about a kind of a shadowy organization that somehow has $500 million called NBC. And Maclean, you'll have to forgive me, I did not remember NBC's existence before this throne speech reminded me of it. It was a journey of discovery for me as well. It rang the vaguest of bells, but I mean, it's only because NBC could mean just about anything. Yeah, it was to the point where I forget I can't find where the line was in here, but they mention it, and I'm like, what? So I had to actually Google it to see what it was. NBC apparently is a new Crown corporation that will, that quote, is committed to building a sustainable economy that will create good paying jobs in every corner of the province and help businesses succeed. Well, this seems like quite the opportunity for a slush fund. In digging further, it seems they have $500 million. It seems like that money was allocated in the COVID response plan last year, which I thought money that wasn't spent by government had to go to paying down debt, which means what they've done is they've probably transferred $500 million cash to this entity like to avoid having to pay down any debt in order to fund them. And they're going to get back to us on their investment strategy and criteria that will be published sometime during 2021. Apparently, they're going to have an independent chief investment officer and a team of professionals and a board of directors. They'll have to do annual reports. It just feels to me like more bureaucracy to basically hand out corporate welfare. Like, is that what I'm reading here properly? Like, I'm all for getting businesses help, especially in some of these sectors that need it. This one now has been in the works for 9 months. That's long enough to have a baby, by the way, for those of you doing math at home. And they're still coming up with the actual process. That one bears a little bit of watching, because that feels a little bit weird to me. And I don't buy for a second that it's going to be some sort of independent investment officer. It's going to be stacked with NDP cronies on their board who have very clear views as to the kind of companies that should be invested in, which will all mesh in with NDP ideology, and no doubt many of them will be unionized, and they'll be taken based on those high-level principles, not actually getting people working again. So in BC, I've got my eye on you.
Well, I mean, you should. It's regardless of what you think of it, it sounds like a major undertaking, and you're right. It just kind of was dropped, and we'll see. I mean, I want to go back and grab on something else you mentioned there, which was contrasting the throne speech with the Dr. Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix briefing, literally just an hour later, where they had subject headings in the throne speech, turning the page on COVID, which I mean, I think is a remnant of a first draft written months ago. Is my take on that, because no one with sense would write about turning the page on COVID on the same day when I believe it's the first time Dr. Bonnie Henry said, we're definitely in a third wave, and we set another new record for patients in ICU. When she referred to the supply of vaccines as not reliable, which is, chilling to those of us who are still waiting for our shots. And in fact, encouraged British Columbians to not leave their neighborhoods, much less travel at all. It is not an exaggeration to say things have never been worse on the pandemic front. And yes, the vaccinations continue apace, and that is good. But if we can't rely on the vaccines, and the news today out of the United States suggests there might be a problem there as well, turning the page is a little bit premature.
Yes, you're correct. Think about the throne speech really tried to cast back to when we all felt good about the pandemic, which, newsflash, none of us ever felt good about the pandemic, so don't try to go back to any time. But, remember a year ago when we'd be out at 7 p.m. banging pots for the frontline workers? Yeah, remember why we were outside banging pots for frontline workers? Because we were all confined to quarters. We were confined to our homes, living in fear of 50 cases, 35 cases, 40 cases. Who wouldn't give to be back at 40 cases? We'd all, happily trade where we are now for that. It was such a weird note to play in this speech. The more I think about it, the more I believe you're correct that they had victory lap. I think Von Palmer wrote about this too. They had victory lap kind of tagged for this speech, and then suddenly realized, oh crap, we can't. Krista Freeland right now is getting raked over the coals on Twitter because there's an 11-second clip of her in some interviews saying essentially that, COVID is a wonderful opportunity to reshape our economy.
What?
Which, no matter what you put before and after that, is a crappy news clip for the Minister of Finance to have. COVID's not a great opportunity for anything. COVID was an opportunity, COVID was about thousands and thousands of Canadians dying, thousands of businesses going out, many people getting sick, still dealing, there is nothing wonderful about this opportunity whatsoever. But I think that's part of the problem for these governments is they're so eager to look like they're building back better, turning the page, moving on, but they don't actually really have much of a plan to do that.
Yeah.
It's more just the rhetoric of it. And I think when people are sitting around going, I want to come back to the throne speech, but you're right about the briefing. It's nonsensical. You're telling me that I live in Langley. I can go to Langley Costco or Surrey Costco and be in a building with 1,000 people, 1,200 people, 1,500 people, but I can't go to the North Shore Mountains to hike alone?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. We're not supposed to cross health boundaries. Well, that's great for me. I can drive from Langley to Burnaby for work because they're both Fraser Health. But my boss lives in Yaletown. He can't drive a shorter distance from Vancouver to Burnaby, because that's technically different health regions. Well, of course he's driving to work. Of course he is. That's nonsensical. No one divides the province based on health regions except the health regions. It's crazy. This idea, you can't drive from Penticton to you shouldn't be going from Penticton to Oliver or Penticton to Kelowna. What? Penticton and Kelowna are what, an hour away, if that, 45 minutes away? Of course that's considered one community by those people. There are people who don't have grocery stores in their community, or if they do, it's a Whole Foods and it's 10 times the cost of a normal grocery store. Of course they have to go to grocery stores across. So it was just another baffling briefing.
Yeah.
Where I've been subjected now to the lectures of certain media people who normally I really like and adore and think a lot of, but tisking people for doing these things. And you're like, I'm sorry, I don't see the problem. We took the kids to Steveston last weekend. We walked through the historic village, the historic fishing village there. Didn't go inside anywhere. It was perfectly fine. But technically, Richmond is Vancouver Coastal Health, and Langley is like Fraser Health. So we shouldn't have done that. Wait, come on. So
yeah, it's
baffling.
frustrating. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, this is not to go back to things we talked about last year, but I mean, it feels very retro in that if you have a backyard, great, good for you. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
This is not about envy, but it is really hard to tell somebody who does not have an outdoor setting that on a beautiful weekend like we're hopefully going to have this coming up, that no, you have to stay in. You have to stay inside your condo or apartment, and you can't drive 20 minutes to a park where you'll be, out in the open. I've got a 6-year-old. I will not in good conscience tell him that, sorry, buddy, this summer also we're not going outside.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very careful the words I use here because I respect the public health orders and I completely understand the reasons for them, but they have to make sense and I have to get there. And I do not understand the rationale for telling me don't go to an outdoor park that is, outside my neighborhood. There are no outdoor parks in my neighborhood that are not currently occupied by tents. So this is true.
Yep.
So if I want to go to an outdoor park, and I do, I have to leave my neighborhood, and I will do that, and I will continue to be safe. I will continue to socially distance. I will continue to step aside if we come across somebody else on the path, and give as much room as humanly possible or more, and I will keep doing that. But you hear that, well, technically you shouldn't even be doing that. No, that is the first time where I've heard a public health order or recommendation, I guess in this case, where I've just said, yeah, no, that's unreasonable.
It was a plea.
You're right. It was a plea. And I understand where it's coming from. I do.
Totally.
She's not doing this lightly. And I have nothing but respect for Dr. Bonnie Henry and even for Adrian Dix. So I get why they're doing this. The numbers are the numbers. But you're quite right to say it's crazy to suggest that you can go to Costco and I can't go to a provincial park 20 minutes from here.
Yeah. We're 2 weeks into this circuit breaker. We're the exact same numbers we were when we started the circuit breaker. Yeah. Except for ICUs are up. And hospitalizations are up. And ICUs, we've discovered now, are not counting non-contagious COVID people, which
is terrifying.
Yeah. And sorry, Adrian Dix, I know you're claiming that only very few surgeries are being postponed. My mother-in-law's elective surgery on a hand she can barely move was one of those surgeries that you postponed. That is a quality of life issue. This elective surgery bullshit labeling is the worst. Elective surgery. Oh, we're canceling elective surgeries. Elective surgeries just means non-life-threatening, I believe.
Yeah.
It is not, like, people think elective surgeries, you think plastic surgery, a nose job, Botox, plastic surgery, like things I don't really need. No, elective surgery is knee replacements, hip replacements, carpal tunnel, incredible quality of life issues. Those are not elective for those poor people who have been bumped now. So you kind of go, get it, if it's not under control, you have the lever to bring it under control. So, Dr. Bonnie, you're not supposed to travel across distances, you're not supposed to go different places. Okay, Dr. Bonnie, the government with which you sit and decide these rules controls provincial campgrounds. Has the minister responsible for parks come out and said, we are canceling all reservations for people who do not live within certain postal codes of these campgrounds? So if you live in Maple Ridge, sure, you can go camp at Golden Ears. But if you live in Richmond, you can't go camping at Golden Ears. This is a lever that they control. No, they haven't. They haven't. And what we saw over spring break was the Soyuz was full and Oliver was full and all these provincial campgrounds were full, and they weren't full with local people generally, because usually you don't camp in your own neighborhood. Usually you want to camp somewhere else, see something a little bit different. They've done nothing to bring that to heel. That is an easy thing for you to do. Okay. And it would send a message, and it would be a clear thing, we don't want you recreating outside. Recreating, by the way, is a terrible government word, but we don't want you recreating outside of your neighborhood. Okay, so we're going to, but they won't do it. So you're like, how serious is this then? How important is this? I forget the name of the trail. What's the name of the trail that goes all the way down Vancouver Island's?
West Coast Trail.
Yeah. So I guess you have to make reservations to do it now because there's so many people. I knew someone who didn't quite calculate the time difference, and I guess because it was being opened up on Eastern Standard Time for some reason, and it was full. 3 hours later, it's full. But are all those people living in Tofino or Ucluelet or, I guess it goes all the way down. Does it go all the way down to Port McNeill? I don't know. But anyway, God help me, I'm not a hiker. Thank you, Lord. But these are things you control. The government controls these levers. They could pull them. So if you're not willing to pull those levers, why should we?
Yeah, and I mean, you didn't even mention the ferries. We're adding sailings on the long weekend. I mean, you could just not add the sailings.
Yeah. Someone told me Rob Fleming was on CFAX Radio saying, well, there's so many essential trips over that weekend that we had to add the sailings.
Well, and there are essential trips, but there are essential trips, but I don't see them as happening more so over a long weekend. And there are people that travel back and forth for their jobs. And we saw, was it last week we were talking about Dr. Bonnie Henry at the Helijet terminal? Yeah. It does happen, and it is valid. But to say that it happens more over Easter weekend, I don't see it as well. How I will describe that, I don't see it.
So Princess Margaret School in Surrey had its 50th COVID letter sent home. 50. Our schools, my kids are at high school in Langley. I think we're around 7 or 8 total. The elementary school, I think, is half of that, 3 or 4. 50. Imagine being a parent in that school. Of course you don't take it seriously. Well, the first 49 didn't get my kid or my family. Well, why will number 50 or 51 or 52 or 55 or 75? But it does show you, and this is the other frustration I have. Surrey's a hot spot. And certain parts of Surrey are especially hot. But we're sending the vaccine to Whistler, where we've just had the premier lecture the young people for their terrible behavior and causing this. But we're now vaccinating all 18 pluses in Whistler to control that. But Surrey, nothing. Hell, Surrey police can't get it. Surrey firefighters can't get it. The guys who actually go to elderly homes and pick people up when they've fallen in the bathtub or emergency situations, they can't get it. But you can if you're the 19-year-old Aussie living in Whistler. This is, I hate the politics of envy. I hate the politics of envy, but I envy.
There's probably more Australians with COVID in Whistler than there are in Australia.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Which
probably true.
We're laughing, but it's terrible.
That's probably true. But the government has a serious problem. So we've seen Angus Reid, which had Horgan as the most popular premier in Canada for a long time, and his handling of COVID is being flawless, 85% at one point. It's now down to a bare majority. It continues to shrink. You see, I don't know if you follow CBus memes on Instagram, but it is I would say the preeminent meme site for British Columbians. It is brutal on Horgan and Dr. Henry. You would actually think it was coming from BC Liberal headquarters. It is so pointed, but they're young and they did not like being blamed for this pandemic. And they are taking it out with some Chef's Kiss memes on, Chef's Kiss is the thing we say at our home. Chef's Kiss memes at Horgan's expense. Reddit, which has generally been very positive about the NDP's handling things, has very much skewed now against what's going on because of his comments and then what's happened subsequently. You're seeing a real shift. Justin McElroy, Mr. Charts, Mr. Just the facts, man, just the facts. He's kind of he's the facts don't bear out what you're saying, which is Justin's incredibly polite, wonderful, lovable way of saying you're lying. The charts don't bear out.
You mentioned CBus memes, and it came up in a conversation I had with a New Democrat who I won't bust here, so relax. But they were complaining about that account and saying, it's just run out of. I think they made the same insinuation that you hinted at, is it's run out of BC Liberal, the party.
Oh, I wish.
And I said, well, I actually don't think that's the case. I think it's just somebody who does memes. And the person, again, I will not bust them here, but said, well, okay, well, if that's true, then why are they picking on us and not, the Liberals and the Greens. And I kind of stared at them for a couple seconds and said, because you're in government. Like, I know you guys still think of yourselves as the good guys, and all parties do, but you're in government now. This is part of the slings and arrows that comes with that. And I mean, you're not going to like all of them. I get that, and you can complain about them to me, and I will always listen. But like, you should understand this is this is part of the job now. It's not going to change, and it's not going to get better.
No, and look, the NDP have bluntly failed young people. They came to power in no small measure because of the overwhelming support of under 40-year-olds. Now they've said you're to blame for the pandemic. Housing costs have skyrocketed. Another house in my neighborhood sold for over asking. It sold over asking. It's 3 doors down from us. It sold for almost 50% more than we paid for our house 2 years ago. Oof. Like you could cut 20% off of housing prices tomorrow. You're still far more expensive than on the last day of the BC Liberal government 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago.
True.
They failed on ICBC. They're now shifting jumped the rates on young people on ICBC. They failed on $10 a day daycare. There's no childcare spots. In fact, you've got childcare providers shutting down because they can't deal with the bureaucracy that's going on. They failed. I'm laughing at, going back to the throne speech, one of the lines, Maclean, life becomes more affordable, not just when costs go down, but also when income goes up. In June, BC's minimum wage will increase to over $15 an hour for the first time. This will give the lowest income workers a well-deserved raise, many of whom have worked in essential services throughout the pandemic. Yeah, nothing's going to make, oh good. I went from 14.15 to 15.15. Boy, life's affordable in BC now. Woo! I can afford to get rid of my 18 roommates and my, third job, and come on. You don't think young people are smart enough to realize that? And this is where Sonia Furstenau's tone-perfect outreach to young people really comes into play. You are seeing, for the first time, a real a clump of young people actually sit back and go, wait a minute, I want to rethink what I'm doing here. I want to rethink this support. And the Greens sound, Sonia should be measuring it. Gavin Dew in the leadership race, he started a campaign, send Gavin $20 to $39 for his leadership campaign because John Horgan doesn't respect 20 to 39-year-olds. Brilliant. I'm all in.
I saw that.
I mean, I'm 40. I turned 45 on Friday, so maybe I'll send him $45. Just kidding. I'm not donating to any campaigns because I want to be neutral for this very important podcast we're doing. But
first of all, a very early happy birthday, since I won't see you until after you turn 45 and cross that demographic threshold. But also, you mentioned Gavin Dew, and this is probably a good seg into our weekly segment, which I suspect will be short this week. Jordan tells us what's new with the BC Liberal leadership race. I don't think there is anything new, is there?
Not much. I mean, everyone was kind of away, so very quiet. So I suspect some of the folks went off and were building campaigns and some stuff out. I have not heard, there was a lot of talk that Kevin Falcon might launch around BC budget time, which is a week from today.
Yes.
I've not heard anything about that since, so that would lead me to believe that maybe they're not, but who knows? I mean, a former finance minister coming out in BC budget is sort of the de facto opposition, I think would be an interesting opportunity. But if the campaign's not ready, it's not ready. And if it's not the right timing, that's their calculation. Just to say, the $20 to $39 thing I thought was the most interesting thing that happened all week in the leadership thing, which is another victory for the Dew crew. Again, reinforcing how well organized and how they're thinking about this in a very intelligent, unique way. So yeah, that's about all I have on leadership, unless there's something I'm missing.
No,
I'm sure
and in fact, I don't think, I think you're right. I think, given the holidays and all that, there was people sort of sitting it out, and with the throne and budget, the government's going to dominate the news cycles. So we'll see if anyone, I can't see there being any launches this week. Next week, we'll see. I would say after the budget, but I mean, who knows?
I also think I think money laundering, because you have so many former BC Liberal officials going on the stand the next couple of weeks, they may want to avoid that window. That would be my advice. You don't want to be in the middle of it and happen to have it coincide with the day Christie's on the stand, and
Yeah, that's true.
Premier Clark said this today. What do you think? That's not, especially for an outsider.
No.
There's no value to that.
Yeah. No, exactly. You're totally right. Let that breathe. I did want to say I don't have tons of details, but if you are, this is not my area of expertise, Vancouver municipal politics, because I'm not a Vancouver guy. But there are apparently no fewer than 2 new parties aiming to launch, not only soon, but possibly both of them this week. Which is interesting, given that Vancouver and municipal politics has been its typical not dull self in the last couple of weeks, and there's a lot of people who see an opportunity there. I gather from what I've heard that Kennedy Stewart's polling is very bad, and it's worth remembering he wasn't a blowaway victor when he won mayor either. So I think there's a real chance for somebody to scoop up there. But the problem is, if everyone sees the same opportunity, they're all taking smaller and smaller slices of the pie.
Yeah, so are you hearing Ken Sims got a party going? Is that coalescing around him?
I didn't know, but not necessarily Ken Sim. I'm not sure where he's going to go. Obviously, he's not running for the NPA,
right?
Which he did 3 years ago. But there are 2 new parties that I guess we're calling them parties. They might even be more properly described as coalitions looking to launch this week. I was approached by 2 of them, to see if there's any interest in us covering, to which I said, please send me your op-eds. I'm happy to look at them, but, I don't have a Vancouver reporter.
Yes, oh, thank God. We're Vancouver. Look, the name I've heard out there from multiple sources is, well-known political operative Mark Marison. Maybe he's kicking the tires on a run for mayor. That would be interesting. It's not often a back rumor comes out and runs. That's always entertaining to us other back rumors who.
Can you think of any others? Brian Topp with the NDP made a ran for their leadership, and it came pretty close if I remember right, but obviously didn't win. I can't think of anyone else. I guess you could argue John Horgan was a staffer.
But he was an MLA for years after.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Dix as well. What about those conservative races with Harper and Manning and whatnot? Was there any?
If there are any, I can't think of any.
Yeah, I can't think of any. Send us Maclean at theorca.ca. Send us your random back rumors that we missed here who have run.
I'm sure there's 1 or 2, but Brian Topp would be the most prominent that I can think of, and most recent probably too.
Yes. The fact we can't name any tells you how successful back rumors generally are moving in. Well, there's Katie Merrifield, the future leader of the BC Liberals. As rumored on Political Capital.
I am going to get at least 1 angry text.
We've got to keep that rumor going to help out Rob Shaw. Look. Okay, let's take best case scenario for those of us who don't like Kennedy Stewart. And there are many. And Stewart polls at 30%. If the other 70% are being divided 5 ways, that makes it really difficult for any of them to get the plurality they need to become the mayor, let alone the there is a little bit of moral authority that comes with actually having a proper majority or close to.
Yep.
Like, if you get 30% of the vote and you're the mayor, are you feeling really confident about your standing with the people? Like, it's tough then to kind of bring in your policies and whatnot because you don't feel like you have that broader base. Look, what needs to happen is, by the way, on the NPA stuff, did you see, of all people, Charlie Smith from the Georgia Straight wrote a passionate column in defense of the board member of the NPA who's kept the restaurant open.
Yeah, I did see that. Like Charlie will surprise you every once and again, won't he?
Yeah, I read a book that talks about horseshoe politics and how the further you go from, the further you go left and right, the more likely they are to meet back. And I'm like, is Charlie at the nexus where he's meeting back between freedom for small businesses and lefty value? Wow, I can't even, what a world I'm living in. Anyways, so the NPA and John Cooper, that seems like it's now cemented, although the NPA Council Caucus is super unhappy.
Yeah.
Could they split off and create their own party? That's a possibility. The problem is, do they have access to the lists the NPA have? That's the value of the NPA, is they have lists, some out of date, but they're still, a starting point. These guys, I just wish we could lock, the center right into a room together and be like, all right, none of you come out until you figure out. Like, this is where the U.S. primary system is so much better, because you can run against each other, and then we'll get there and we'll whittle you down, and then whoever is the survivor can beat Kennedy Stewart by 50 points.
Well, I mean, if you're watching this and you're saying, I think reasonably, what chance do you have if your best case scenario is 30% of the vote, as you mentioned for Kennedy Stewart? I mean, I'm originally from Calgary, and not that long ago now, well, I guess like 15 years ago now, there was a mayoral race with no incumbent. Dave Bronconnier was moving on, and there was literally a four-way race for mayor. The one that Naheed Nenshi won, surprisingly. He won with, I want to say like 27% of the vote. That all four candidates essentially got a quarter of the vote. And then he just got a hair more than his three competitors. And he was mayor for a generation, essentially. Now, this isn't about liking or not liking Naheed Nenshi. You can dislike him or like him. But the point remains the same, is once you win, you have a tremendous incumbency benefit. It says something about Kennedy Stewart that doesn't seem to be the case for him. But, I mean, if there's a lot of competitors, yes, you're going after a smaller piece of the pie, but it also means a lot more can happen in a strange race, and that you can win with, you mentioned 30%. I think 30%, the way things are shaping up in Vancouver, might be a pretty solid number. A third of the vote might win that.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, like, who's turning out on election day to get, I'm excited to go vote for Kennedy Stewart. Well, no one living in Strathcona. Yeah. Certainly no one running a small business. What few there are left in Vancouver. I don't sense the NDP are terribly enthused with Kennedy Stewart. I mean, it seems like Dave Eby and the housing folks, like one of the most laughable things that the NDP government has had to do is come up with this tripartite agreement between Parks Board, City Council, and BC Housing as to who's responsible for what at Strathcona. Guys, it's all legislated what you're each responsible for. You don't need a separate memorandum of understanding between government agencies in order to know who does what. Like, that's all laid out in mandates and law. Like, just do it. But that does show you how little respect or trust there is among those groups for, each other actually living up to their obligations. I just don't know, who's excited to get up and vote for Kennedy Stewart? What I wonder is this the opportunity, if the center-right had 3 or 4 candidates running all at once, and you had a weak Kennedy Stewart, is that the opportunity for the Vancouver Greens to finally run a proper mayoralty candidate and see if they could get an Adrian Carr elected mayor? Look, that's Greens,
actually a good idea.
The Greens desperately need, provincially, a foothold in the Lower Mainland. It's only going to come in downtown Vancouver.
They came really close in the last election in West Vancouver Sea to Sky. Do you remember? They were actually declared the winner on election night, and they lost it after the mail-in ballots, I think, were counted. But I mean, the point is that they came really, really close. Yeah,
that's a good point. But they need that foothold in the Lower Mainland. They cannot just be an island party forever.
No.
And
it's not even a Vancouver Island party. It is a Southern Vancouver Island party. It's just, it's not enough. And the Greens know this in talking to them. But it's one of those things that's much easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure. So, but you do wonder, is that the opportunity? Like, could an Adrian Carr pick up 30% of the vote, and would that be enough to oust? At some point, Stewart becomes a bit of a dead man walking, and even people who are supporting him but aren't excited about him are looking for other options. Maybe this is the time for Adrian Carr to be that option.
It could be. Well, Vancouver city politics are never dull. Neither are my city politics here in Victoria, which we'll maybe talk about next week. But until then, I mean, we have more than covered. We have given the Throne all the coverage it deserves.
Two last news bites from the Throne. Okay. This quote. The George Massey crossing replacement will continue to be a priority. I can't agree with a straight face. Continue to be a priority. You guys canceled the bridge. It would be opening in 2022. It would be 3/4 done. Continue to be a priority. How did they say that with a straight face? Jared Austin, come on. I don't know. Kudos to you for being able to read that without breaking out in gales of laughter. And then one more, and this is not usually an issue that certainly any of my many critics on Twitter. By the way, you notice on Twitter all of a sudden there's a bunch of people showing up with 0 followers, following 5 people, and they're always like Keith Baldry and Global BC. And then all of a sudden crapping all over anyone who dares to question the NDP or Dr. Bonnie. Seems to me that they have a little farm going there in NDP land, churning these folks out. You click their profiles and there's not really anything there, and you're like, how odd that you're decided to join Twitter now in April 2021, follow 5 people, and start to crap on exactly the same people over and over again. I love it because it's an Instamute, and they'll spend the rest of their NDP paid days doing that kind of thing. But anyways, all that to say, here's the other one: supporting arts and culture. Okay. Pandemic's dealt a significant blow to artists, absolutely. Not being able to play, it has hurt all of us. The arts are the soul of our communities. I agree. Arts and culture are very important to our communities, and the NDP government has done nothing to help that sector. You talk to people who planned concerts, got permission to do drive-in concerts at one point, and then had that kiboshed after the fact. There's been no financial help from the provincial government. There's been some from the feds through CERB and other things. Like, you support arts and culture, you believe this is the soul of our community, and you do nothing to help them? That's where people start to also tune out, and especially young people. They know the deal.
You can't fool the kids, Jordan.
You can't fool the kids. They're too woke. They're too lit.
He'll never live that down. I think that was an unfortunate slip. Oh well. Next week is the budget. We haven't even talked about what we're going to do for next week's show.
So I've got a training thing on Thursday where I have to go in and learn how to be in a virtual budget lockup. I can hardly wait.
I have mine tomorrow morning on the media side. So we're not even allowed to talk on Tuesday until very late in the day. So there's a chance we might do this Wednesday. I'm just spitballing here.
No, I mean, I think budget opens up at 2. So why wouldn't we just go at 2:30?
Okay,
3?
Let's do it. 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
Unless you bump me for more important media like Check TV, but whatever.
There's no one more important, Jordan.
Oh, thanks.
This is my favorite show.
Okay. You hear that, Shaw? His favorite show.
Rob is absolutely listening, and we're 44 minutes in.
Yeah,
luckily he does the intros on Political Capital, so if he fights off a sneeze, he can just have Check edit out and post. We don't have that luxury here.
That's right. He's so much more powerful. He's so much more powerful.
Well, until next week, when we'll be later on Tuesday, sounds like, after the budget. He's Jordan Bateman. I am Maclean K. Happy politics.